Once again, I urge our colleagues to vote against that resolution of disapproval. It is the wrong way to go for workers, it is the wrong way to go for businesses and for the middle class. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
The Senator from Illinois.
Madam President, let me join in the remarks by the Senator from Washington. This National Labor Relations Board rule, which will be voted on by the Senate tomorrow, is one that was needed. The rule change was needed. And the effort on the floor, of course, is to undo this decision by the National Labor Relations Board. If they say that justice is denied, look at the current situation when it comes to a vote by workers on collective bargaining. If delayed at every potential opportunity, and sometimes it happens, workers have to wait on average 198 days, that's 6.5 months, to have a simple vote deciding if they would be represented by a union. In some extreme cases, they've been forced to wait 13 years for the right to vote on collective bargaining. 1 in 5 workers who openly advocate for unions during an election campaign is fired. As a result of these tactics, 35% of workers give up and withdraw from the election before a vote is held. The proposed NLRB rule changes will remove unnecessary delays in the process, cut down on unnecessary litigation, and provide workers a meaningful vote in a reasonable period of time. The proposed rules will apply the same way to workers attempting to decertify a union as it does to workers trying to form a union. So from the business side, if they think that workers no longer wish to belong to a union, there will be a timely vote on that as well. It applies the same way to unions and employers. It is fundamentally fair, and that's why I encourage my colleagues to join with me and Senator Murray and many others in voting against this effort by Senator Enzi to overturn the proposed National Labor Relations Board rule. I ask consent that my statement in its entirety be entered in the record at this point.
Without objection.
Madam President, at a separate place in the record, I ask consent that my following remarks be shown.
Without objection.
This Wednesday, the Supreme Court is going to hear a challenge to Arizona's controversial immigration law. I thought about this law over the weekend in Springfield, Illinois. There's an annual event where a special award is given to those sons and daughters of Illinois who have done great service to our state and nation. Admiral Thunman, one of my neighbors in Springfield, was a graduate of Springfield High School, enlisted in the Navy, worked his way up to the rank of Admiral in the United States Navy, and at one point commanded our submarine fleet. To think of this young man from the middle of the Midwest ending up in charge of our submarine fleet is a great testament to his ability and to the opportunity that the Navy gave him to serve his country. When he got up to receive his award, this Lincoln Award, he said, "I stand here humbled by the memory of my father, who was an illegal immigrant to this country from Norway, who came here jumping off a ship as a sailor and lived in the United States illegally until the time that he was prepared to volunteer to serve our nation in World War II." Admiral Thunman tells that story over and over, and what a reminder it is that the sons and daughters of immigrants to this country, as well as those immigrants themselves, have literally made America what it is today. 101 years ago, my mother arrived on a boat from Lithuania. Her boat came to Baltimore, Maryland. And my grandmother took her and her sister and brother to East St. Louis, Illinois, where I grew up many years later. That's my story. It's an American story, and it's one that's repeated over and over again. Immigrants are part of America. It is the diversity of America that gives us our strength. And those who hate and loathe immigrants have always been here. But probably as soon as the Mayflower landed, they looked over their shoulder and said, "We hope nobody else is coming." But the fact is, people have been coming from all over the world, and they still would rather come to this country than leave it, which is quite a testament to this great nation. Senator Lieberman made that point on the floor the other day. So this week, the Supreme Court is going to take up an important question on immigration, the Arizona law. Under the Arizona law, any undocumented immigrant can be arrested and charged with a state crime, an Arizona crime, solely on the basis of their immigration status. And it's a crime for a legal immigrant in Arizona to fail to carry documents proving their legal status under this law. Under our Constitution, states don't have the right to pass their own laws preempting federal laws on immigration. That's why the Justice Department filed the case the Supreme Court will hear this week. Let's be clear. It's wrong to criminalize people because of their immigration status. That is not the way we treat immigrants in America. It is not right to make criminals of people who go to work every day, cook our food, clean our hotel rooms, care for our aging parents in nursing homes, and care for our children as well. It is not right to make criminals of those who worship with us in our churches, synagogues, and mosques, and people who send their children to the same schools as our children. Here's the reality. This approach that Arizona law suggests will not help combat illegal immigration. Law enforcement doesn't have the time or resources to prosecute and incarcerate millions of people. Making undocumented immigrants into criminals will simply drive them further into the shadows. The Arizona Association of Chiefs of Police took a look at the new Arizona law and came out in opposition to it. They said it makes it more difficult for them to maintain order and enforce law in Arizona. Immigrants, because of this law, the Chiefs of Police said, will be much less likely to cooperate, and they need their cooperation to continue to fight crime. There's another troubling aspect to the Arizona immigration law. According to experts, the law encourages racial profiling. I chair the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Constitution, Civil Rights, and Human Rights. Last week at a hearing on racial profiling, we had the first hearing on the subject since 9/11/2001. One of the subjects we examined at the hearing is the spate of federal, state, and local measures in recent years that, under the guise of combating illegal immigration, have subjected Hispanic Americans to an increase in racial profiling. The Arizona immigration law is a prime example, and let me explain to you why. Arizona's law requires police officers to check the immigration status of any individual if they have, quote, reasonable suspicion, close quote, that the person is undocumented. What is the basis for reasonable suspicion? Arizona's guidance on the law tells police officers to consider factors such as how someone is dressed and their ability to communicate in English. Two former Arizona attorneys general, joined by 42 other former state attorneys general, filed a brief in the Arizona case, and they said, and I quote, application of the Arizona law requires racial profiling, close quote. One of the witnesses at our hearing was Ron Davis, Chief of Police at East Palo Alto, California. Chief Davis, along with 16 other current and former chief law enforcement officers, the Major Cities Chiefs of Police Association, and the Police Executive Research Forum, filed a brief in the Arizona case. Here is what the brief filed in the Arizona case before the Supreme Court by the Chiefs of Police said. The statutory standard of reasonable suspicion of unlawful presence in the United States will, as a practical matter, produce a focus on minorities and specifically Latinos. Let me be clear. I think most Americans would share this belief. The vast majority of law enforcement officers in America perform their jobs honorably and courageously. When they wake up in the morning and put that badge on, they literally put their lives on the line for you, for me, and for all of us in America. Unfortunately, the inappropriate actions by a few who engage in racial profiling create mistrust and suspicion, and that hurts all police officers. The evidence clearly demonstrates, as well, that racial profiling doesn't solve crimes. It just doesn't work in law enforcement, and that's what the Chief of Police, Ron Davis, told us as well. That's why so many law enforcement leaders strongly oppose racial profiling and the Arizona immigration law. Instead of measures that harm law enforcement and promote racial profiling, like the Arizona immigration law, we need to support practical solutions to fix America's broken immigration system. If I could say one word in defense of Arizona, it is the fact that our failure, Congress's failure, Washington's failure to deal with immigration has brought on this effort by many states and localities. We have our own responsibility. And let me tell you where I think we should start. We should start our reform of immigration with the DREAM Act. 11 years ago, I introduced this bill, legislation that allows a select group of immigrant students with great potential to contribute to America. The DREAM Act would give these students a chance to earn legal status and ultimately citizenship if they came to the United States as children or long-term U.S. residents, have good moral character, graduate from high school, and complete 2 years of college or military service in good standing. Russell Pierce, the author of the Arizona immigration law, had this to say about the DREAM Act, and I quote, here's what Mr. Pierce said: "The DREAM Act is one of the greatest legislative threats to America's sovereignty, national security, and economic future." Well, I see it differently. And so do people like General Colin Powell and former Defense Secretary Robert Gates. They support the DREAM Act because it would make America a stronger nation, giving these talented immigrants a chance to serve our military and improve and contribute to our economy. Tens of thousands of highly qualified, well-educated young people would enlist in the armed services if the DREAM Act becomes law. And studies have found that DREAM Act participants would contribute literally trillions of dollars to the U.S. economy during their working lives. The best way to understand the need for the DREAM Act is to meet the dreamers. Today I want to introduce you to a dreamer from Arizona. Here she is. Her name is Dulce Matos. She was brought to the United States by her parents from Mexico as a young child. At Carl Hayden High School in Phoenix, Arizona, Dulce became a dedicated member of the school's robotics club, and she found her true love, engineering. She went on to graduate from Arizona State University, you see her standing there with the mascot, and earned a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. As a senior, Dulce received an internship to work on the NASA space station. But after she graduated, reality set in. Because Dulce is undocumented, one of the dreamers, she can't work as an engineer in America. She can't become licensed in any state. She has no country. In 2008, Dulce co-founded the Arizona DREAM Act Coalition, an organization of more than 200 DREAM Act students in predicaments just like hers. She continues to volunteer at the high school that she attended. Today, Dulce is 27 years old. Just last week, this amazing young woman was named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine. Time published a profile of Dulce written by the actor Eva Longoria. Here's what the profile said, and I'll quote, "Dulce represents the finest of her generation, an undocumented Latina confronted with legal barriers to pursuing her engineering dream. She chose to fight for the right to contribute to the country she has called home since she was very young. Dulce takes on powerful opponents with grace and conviction, saying, 'We are Americans, and Americans don't give up.'" Dulce is right. Americans don't give up. We've been fighting for the DREAM Act now for 11 years. We're not going to give up until it's signed into law by a President of the United States. I am honored that this President, President Barack Obama, when he was a senator, was a co-sponsor of my legislation. I know where his heart is when it comes to the DREAM Act. Unlike the Arizona immigration law, the DREAM Act is a practical solution to a serious problem with our broken immigration system. I hope the Supreme Court will strike down the Arizona immigration law. And I again beg my colleagues to support the DREAM Act. It is the right thing to do, and it will make America a stronger nation. Madam President, I yield the floor.
The senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask and ask to speak as if in morning business for up to 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Earlier this month, or late last month, I brought to Washington 55 or so college presidents from Ohio, presidents of 2-year and 4-year private and public colleges and universities, to discuss a whole host of issues. And one thing that always comes up when you talk about young people, when you talk about college, you talk about universities, is access to higher education, that far too many of our young people simply can't afford to go to college. My wife, graduate of Kent State, some 30 years ago, was privileged in those days, even though nobody in her family had ever gone to college. Her dad carried a union card, a utility worker in Ashtabula, Ohio, working as a maintenance worker in the local power plant. She was able to go to school because in those days college was more accessible. Pell Grants, some loans, and tuition was significantly lower. And she was able to be the first in her family to go to college and went to Kent State University. Today it's much harder. Tuition is far too high. Pell Grants haven't kept up with the cost of education the way they might have 30 years ago. And now one of the options we have, the subsidized Stafford loan, which is available to students based on need, is often the main pathway to college for a number of them, are under stress, if you will. If we do nothing, if Congress doesn't do anything, but the interest on these critical loans will double for borrowers beginning July 1st, 2012. So the interest rates will actually double on those students if Congress does nothing. The interest rates right now are 3.4%. That's why they're called subsidized Stafford loans. We know that investing in our young people this way, giving them an opportunity to go to college if they couldn't otherwise, can make such a difference in their lives. I don't think, obviously, many people shouldn't go. So, a number of people don't want to go to college. That's fine. Those that want to go should have that opportunity. Student loans, student debt has reached in this country about $870 billion, exceeding credit cards and auto loans. As more and more students continue to enroll in higher ed, balances are expected to continue climbing. This means fewer of our young adults will be able to buy a home, start a business, or continue on to graduate school. Already, students graduate from four-year colleges and universities in Ohio with, on average, about $27,000 in student loan debt. If the interest rates doubled, it will add another $2,000 in debt for the average borrower, as much as an additional $5,000 for the neediest borrower of subsidized Stafford loans. Subsidized Stafford student loans. A number of it in this institution, in the Senate, on the Democratic side, are trying to convince our colleagues how important it is that we stop this interest rate from doubling. We must act before July 1st. And just as we have an obligation to keep college affordable for middle-class Americans and working-class Americans, we have as great an obligation to keep college accessible to American veterans. This year, more than 500,000 service members and veterans are expected to take advantage of the post-9/11 GI Bill, a bill we passed out of the Veterans Affairs Committee to ensure that all veterans could afford the rising cost of college. The VA is expected to spend some $11 billion in education benefits and other GI Bill benefits this year alone. We know in the 1940s and 50s what the first GI Bill did, signed near the end of World War II, how it created a whole generation of prosperity and a strong middle class. We know that the GI Bill of Rights, which the House and Senate passed, I believe 3 years ago, has begun to help large numbers of veterans again. Unfortunately, service members and veterans are often aggressively recruited by some educational institutions that use misleading information. For instance, if you visit the website gibill.com, it directs a veteran to enter his or her personal and contact information to obtain information about the GI Bill's educational benefits. It looks just like a government website, but it's not. It turns around and sells that veteran's information often to for-profit colleges. Earlier today, I was welcomed at a VFW post in Cleveland by Jason Plesko, the commander of that post. I met with Brad Sonnenstein, a U.S. Air Force veteran, now studying at Kent State, and Joshua Ryder, the assistant director of the Center for Adult and Veteran Services at Kent State University. Brad explained how he was inundated with offers and letters when he was exploring how to utilize his well-earned GI benefits. Those offers overwhelmingly came from for-profit colleges. He said they were more interested with their own bottom line than helping those who served in the front lines. That's simply not right. No one's in a better position to make a decision what's best for them as a veteran than the veteran herself and the veteran himself. We can play a role in assisting them. The GI Bill Consumer Awareness Act provides veterans with more and better information about their benefits, calls for improved education counseling, and gives colleges new resources to hire people like Joshua Ryder that help returning veterans, requires all institutions of higher education to disclose critical information like the average student loan debt, the transferability of credits, and accurate job placement data. We do that at our state universities. We do that at most of our not-for-profit private schools. We do that at our two-year community colleges. Those using the GI Bill tend to be older than the average student population. They choose to serve our nation often right out of high school rather than going straight to college. And because of this, many have families and careers and other challenges that their classmates don't have. Giving our veterans the tools to make the best possible decisions benefits all of them. That's the importance of the GI Bill Consumer Awareness Act. I thank particularly Senator Murray, chair of the Veterans Committee, for her work on this legislation. This body should pass it immediately. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to first express my appreciation to the senator from Ohio for his work on these education issues, particularly the importance of the Stafford loan and avoiding the interest rate jump that is scheduled to take place. And I'd point out that had we passed the so-called Buffett rule bill so that Americans who earn well over $1 million a year will actually all pay a fair share of taxes, that would have created somewhere between $47 billion and $163 billion, I believe, in revenues, and that would readily pay for keeping the student loan rate down. So I hope we can find another way to do it, but that would have been one good way. The reason that I'm on the floor this evening is because I was at Wickford Junction in Rhode Island earlier today, where a new commuter rail station has been built, largely through the energy and effort of my senior senator, Jack Reed, over many years. And Secretary LaHood, the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, came to be present at that event. And that reminded me, of course, of the highway bill, which is probably the biggest jobs bill that we could pass here in Congress. We tend to talk a good game on jobs. Recently, we even referred to a bill as a jobs bill. It had kind of a trick. It was actually called a Jump Start, J, Our, O, Business, B, Startups, S, J-O-B-S, jobs. They made an acronym so that it sounded like a jobs bill, when what it really did was to allow people to market stocks without the usual safeguards that protect investors and consumers. So we do a lot to try to convince people that we're working on jobs here in Congress, but the one bill that indisputably is really, really going to be helpful to the American economy to provide jobs would be the highway bill that the Senate passed. 2.9 million jobs protected or created. In my state of Rhode Island, it's 9,000 jobs. And I promise you, Madam President, we could use those 9,000 jobs in Rhode Island right now. The bill passed the Senate with flying colors, with every kind of credit that you could associate with a piece of legislation. It passed 74 to 22. A 75th senator indicated that he would have supported it, but he was called out of town for a funeral, and obviously with a 74-22 lopsided vote, his vote was not necessary. But in effect, 75 senators are on record supporting that bill, which in this Senate, as everybody knows, is a really considerable landslide of a majority. 2.9 million jobs is a serious thing in this economy. 9,000 in Rhode Island we desperately need. And the bill left not only with the support of a unanimous Environment and Public Works Committee, where it came from originally, and I want to commend both Senator Boxer and Senator Inhofe, the chair and the ranking member, for pulling that together. As people who watch the Senate know, Senator Boxer and Senator Inhofe come from rather different political persuasions, and yet they were able to agree on this and bring a bill out of the committee unanimously. It then came to the floor and went forward. We had 5 weeks of floor debate. We added 40 amendments, either by vote or agreement. It was very bipartisan. It was very transparent. and we ended up, as I said, with that 75-22 expression of support by the Senate for that bill. Rather different story on the House side. They knew that the March 31st deadline was approaching. It had been a matter of law for a long, long time now, and they blew the deadline. They had no bill going into it. They tried several times to come up with something. They couldn't do a thing. They had no bill at all. So without a bill, one would hope that they could have passed the Senate bill. They certainly had the votes. All they had to do was call it up and pass it. Democrats and Republicans would have voted for it, and we would be getting those jobs out there right now. But instead, they had no bill, and they chose to pass an extension. The extension is actually pretty harmful. They actually passed two, and they're both harmful. The first short-term extension, I spoke to my DOT director in Rhode Island, and he was at the Wickford Junction as well, and we've done a couple of other events in the past week or so to try to bring attention to this. He has a list of roughly 95, 96 projects that they want to get done in Rhode Island in the summer building season, the highway construction season. He estimates that probably 40 of those jobs are going to fall off the list because they don't know what their long-term funding is, and they can't commit to those jobs until this gets settled. So these short-term extensions are very harmful. They cost jobs. They are job killers. And yet the House has passed two of them. To make it even more complicated, they threw on the last one a requirement that the Keystone Pipeline be bulldozed through all the regulatory and environmental reviews that are necessary. Say what you want about the Keystone Pipeline, it is a completely contentious, controversial issue here in Congress. They did not make an effort to resolve it on the House side. This was not something where they brought people together, came to a resolution on the Keystone Pipeline, and then added to the bill. No, they just took their Republican version of it without any effort to be bipartisan and stuffed it into the highway extension. So they've missed the chance to pass really good bipartisan legislation out of the Senate. They've passed a job-killing extension that is very harmful to folks doing highway work around the country, and they've complicated it further by throwing a controversial issue on top. So if you are serious about jobs, and I know we talk a lot about it in the Senate, if you're serious about jobs, we should stop that nonsense, take up the Senate bill, and pass it in the House and get everybody to work. In the absence of that, we need to make sure that we move to conference very quickly, that we appoint conferees, and that we get going. And this is important to Rhode Island. As I said, we desperately need these highway jobs, and so I'm going to continue, along with many of my colleagues, coming to the Senate floor to continue to put the pressure on to do something that is very simple: pass a highway bill. This is not complicated. We have been doing it since Eisenhower was president. And the fact that we can't do it now says a lot about the capacity for governance of the House of Representatives under this Speaker. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Minnesota.
Madam President, after our work on this important bill to reform the Postal Service is complete, we will be turning to another important bill, one that has a long history of bipartisan support. That bill, the Violence Against Women Act, is a law that has literally changed the way we think about violence against women in the United States. The Violence Against Women Act is one of the great legislative success stories of this generation. Since it was first passed in 1994, and I will tell you that then Senator Biden was involved in drafting that legislation, led that effort, and someone who we miss very dearly in Minnesota, Paul Wellstone, and his wife Sheila were also involved in getting this important bill passed. Well, since that time, annual domestic violence rates have fallen by 50%, as communities nationwide have stopped looking at these issues as family issues and started treating domestic violence and sexual assault as the serious crimes that they are. Before I came to the Senate, Madam President, I spent 8 years as the chief prosecutor for Minnesota's largest county, Hennepin County. During that time, both the prevention and the prosecution of domestic violence were one of my top priorities. We were very proud of the Domestic Violence Service Center, which was really cutting edge in the nation, which was a one-shop where people could go when they were victims of domestic violence, a place for their kids. Shelters would have representatives there. Prosecutors would be able to charge out complaints. Police would be there for protective orders. And it was a way to help people who were really at the point where they thought no one was there for them, for women to be able to come in and find one place that was safe for them to be. But as we all know, there is still a lot of work to be done. According to a recent survey conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 24 people per minute are victims of rape, physical violence, or stalking. Approximately 1 in 4 women have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner at some point in their lifetime, and 45% of the women killed in the U.S. every year are killed by an intimate partner. Every year, close to 17,000 people lose their lives to domestic violence. These statistics mean that domestic violence and sexual assault and stalking are still problems in America. As far as we've come, we can still do better. That is why it is such a good thing that we passed the VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization, out of our Judiciary Committee. And the bill now has the support of 61 senators, including 8 Republicans. I'm hopeful that we will be able to pass this bill quickly after we take it up later this week. It has taken too long. Combating domestic violence and sexual assault is an issue that we should all be able to agree on. Many of the provisions in the reauthorization bill make important changes to the current law. The bill consolidates duplicative programs and streamlines others. It provides greater flexibility in the use of grant money by adding more purpose areas to the list of allowable uses. It has new training requirements for people providing legal assistance to victims, and it takes important steps to address the disproportionately high domestic violence rates in the Native American communities. The bill also fills some gaps in the system, and I'm pleased to say that it includes a legislation that I introduced with Senator Hutchinson to address high-tech stalking, cases where stalkers use technology like the Internet, video surveillance, and bugging to stalk their victims. Sadly, we're seeing more of this. This bill will give law enforcement better tools for cracking down on stalkers. Just as with physical stalking, high-tech stalking may foreshadow more serious behavior down the road. It's an issue to take seriously, and we literally in law enforcement must be as sophisticated as those that are trying to break the law. That's why we need to update this law. We also shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the VAWA reauthorization has strong support from law enforcement. The Fraternal Order of Police support this bill. The Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association support this bill. The National Sheriff's Association support this bill, and the International Association of Chiefs of Police support this bill. Recent events in my state have shown me and really the entire population of Minnesota in the worst possible way just how closely domestic violence is linked with the safety of our law enforcement officers. I don't think people always think of that. I think they realize when police are driving out on the road and drunk drivers are out driving on the road, they're at greater risk because they're constantly the police out on the road. But what they don't realize is that one of the leading causes of death of officers is domestic violence-related incidences. A couple of months ago, Madam President, I attended the funeral of Sean Schneider, a young police officer from Lake City, Minnesota. Officer Schneider died responding to a domestic violence call, a 17-year-old girl who was being abused by her boyfriend. When Officer Schneider arrived at the scene, he was shot in the head. The girl survived, but Officer Schneider literally gave his life to save another. I attended that funeral, and I will never forget the heartbreaking scene of his 2 young sons walking down the church aisle with the little girl, his daughter, in a blue dress covered with stars. I think it reminds all of us that domestic violence just doesn't hurt the immediate victim. It hurts entire families, entire communities. This has never been a partisan bill, Madam President. It is crucial to pass this bill. We've made a lot of progress over the years, and we've been able to work across the aisle to build on VAWA's success. That's something that means a lot to me, and it certainly means a lot to the millions of people who are victims of domestic abuse and sexual assault every single year. So I urge my colleagues to support our efforts to bring this bill to the floor quickly. We can pass it this week. We can provide desperately needed help to victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, and other such crimes. Madam President, I yield the floor. The absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to call the quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that upon disposition of S. 1789,